In the last part, we just finished closing one of the largest encirclements probably ever. 624 divisions. And you can see now, just by looking at the front, how much it affected our enemies. Their front line is awfully thin right now, and it's full of understrength units. We're going to take advantage of that now by aggressively expanding in all directions. The time for playing defense and launching limited counterattacks is over. It's about time we took control of the rest of Europe. The plan is pretty straightforward. Take down the countries in the west first, secure the French coastline, and then turn east. We're taking a quick trip into Switzerland first though. There are these two mountain passes in the south that would block off Italy if we took them and allow us to shorten our front line. It's just a better defendable position, so that's our first goal before we push into France. And while we're at it, we might as well go for an encirclement or two. Earlier on in this campaign, I decided that I wasn't going to be using subs. I changed my mind at some point though, so I've started mass producing them in the background. We're also slowly managing to take back control over the air. I've decided to use heavy fighters in this campaign for the extra range. I don't need that range yet, but since we're at war with the entire world, eventually we'll be using these planes in Russia and in the Pacific where the air zones are larger. Next up is the invasion of France. We're going to aim for Dunkirk and follow the coastline all the way down. For those who've missed the previous parts in this series, here's a quick breakdown of the units on screen. I'm using 4 different division templates. The first is a standard line infantry. That's the one that looks like a wolf's head. Then I have 3 different types of marines. There's the regular type with the default marine symbol, an elite marine that has the 2 crossed swords, and a dedicated pocket closer that has the cat mask icon. Pocket closers have maintenance companies, and I was microwing with them earlier on to try and steal as much equipment as possible. But by this point in the campaign, I have so much spare equipment that I don't really need them anymore. I'm too lazy to switch them back to the regular template though, so I'm just leaving them as is. My elite marines and my regular marines have the exact same template. The only difference is that I've set it up so that elite marines get the best equipment first, since they are the units I'm pushing with. They've also all been awarded medals. Every single division that I've given a medal to has been converted into an elite marine. Some of them only have a single medal, but some of them have as many as 10. Now, as for the unit colors, yellow units have the makeshift bridges ability, white units have Fortress Buster, and I often switch units back and forth between these 2 generals whenever I come across a river crossing or some forts. Light blue units are port guards. All the other colors, though, are just random and don't mean anything anymore, so you can ignore them. Every single one of my divisions has one thing in common, though. They are all 51 combat width. They are 23s. 20 infantry, 3 artillery. Now I understand that that probably sounds like a very strange division template. Why would anyone ever use a division that's so large? Surely those won't fit into any of the battles, right? In any other campaign, that would be true. This is not any other campaign though. This is not vanilla. This is Ragnarok. And the combat width of every single battle in this mod has been roughly tripled. Planes tiles that are typically 70 width are now well over 200 width. And the point of that change, the reason why the creator of this mod decided to triple the width like this, is so that the bot can actually make use of all of its extra divisions. Having all the armies in the world under its command would be useless if those divisions couldn't make it into the fight after all. And this is the main reason why so many players struggle to beat this mod. In theory, it's supposed to be difficult to hold because you need so many divisions to fill out the combat width along your front line, while the bot can do it with just sheer weight of numbers. But when you understand a little bit about combat width and how it works, you can notice that this change isn't actually the disadvantage that so many claim it is. There is an exploit here that allows you to use this combat width change against the bot. Rather than make lots of small units, you can instead make a smaller number of massive units. And this comes with a wide variety of advantages. First is HP. Big units have lots of HP. My units are barely taking damage right now because they are 51 width behemoths with way more HP than they have any right to have. And this is all made possible because of this tripled combat width. That single change completely upended everything about what is meta and what isn't in this game. All those meta unit designs you see on Reddit or in YouTube tutorials were created around combat width restrictions that don't exist here in this campaign, so they don't apply. The meta is different now. I actually don't know what the new division meta would be under Ragnarok conditions. Probably 50 width tank divisions if I were to take a guess, since that's as large as you can go. But I decided not to use tanks anymore in this campaign. I just don't need them. I focused my entire build around making defensive infantry so strong that they would hold the line against anything, and in so doing I inadvertently created monsters. My defensive infantry became so strong that they have no trouble attacking now, and since their HP is so high they barely take any losses. We don't need armored units. We can just brute force our way through the enemy line with these massive walls of HP. Making tanks now, even though that was my original plan, would just be a waste of time and add unneeded complexities to this playthrough. And that's really the main theme of this whole campaign: simplicity. It's not about finding the optimal strategy to beat Ragnarok, it's about finding the easiest, a strategy that anyone can use. That has been the main goal right from part 1 of this series, and I'd say it's largely been a success so far. Other than that one naval invasion earlier in Denmark, it's pretty much been smooth sailing right from the very beginning, all because of these huge divisions. Having units like these also allows you to concentrate a greater proportion of your army into a small number of really good generals. If I had instead split up all these big units into hundreds and hundreds of small units, all the XP I'm getting from these encirclements would be spread around among all these dozens of weaker generals. Units like those wouldn't ever be able to fight at their full potential because of that. With big units, I was able to concentrate all that XP into a small number of generals, and so I was able to get most of them to level 9, including my field marshal, and I unlocked a bunch of super useful traits in the process. This gives all my divisions tons of extra stats. There is one final reason I'll mention for why I chose to use these massive units. Though it is a bit technical and I should probably make a dedicated video about it, complete with diagrams instead of trying to explain it as a disembodied voice over a time lapse. In any case though, I'm talking about the targeting system. Before this campaign, I had just learned about what targeting was and how it worked, and I wanted to try and experiment with that mechanic. I had a weird idea and I wanted to test if it worked. It started with a question. In a battle, how does the game decide what enemy unit your division sends its attacks to? When you learn the answer to this, another advantage of these massive divisions of mine reveals itself. I'm going to walk through it step by step so you can understand what it was that I was trying to achieve with these weird divisions. All this info is available on the wiki as well, by the way, if this explanation is too hard to follow. Imagine, for a moment, one of my 51 width units gets into a fight. How does the game know which enemy unit to send its attacks to? There is an algorithm for this, a procedure, and it starts by taking the combat width of my unit and doubling it, the number 51. Multiply it by 2. That gives you 102. That is now what is known as the engagement width of my unit. It's supposed to represent the small portion of the battle that my unit can engage in, because a real-life division doesn't see the entire battle, only the portion of it that takes place in the sector it's deployed in. That's what is being represented with this system. Anyway, the game will now randomly select enemy units in the battle until it has chosen 102 combat width worth of them, and it will create a list of those units, the targeting list. That list is the list of targets that my 51 width division can fight. The damage that my division now deals to that list of targets is now separated into two types. Splash damage, that is evenly spread among all the divisions in that list, and focus damage, that is concentrated on whatever enemy unit the game calculates is the most vulnerable. And the game is pretty good at knowing that, by the way. It tries to find a unit with low org, and it also tries to avoid units with the armor bonus, and takes into account hardness as well. Generally, you can trust that the game will know a good target to send this focused damage to. But now, a question arises. What proportion of the damage is spread around evenly, and what proportion is concentrated on the most vulnerable enemy unit? I won't show the formula for this here, but you can actually find it on the wiki. The important thing to understand, however, is that in this formula, coordination and initiative are multiplied together. Boosting coordination and boosting initiative both increase the proportion of your attacks that get focused on the most vulnerable enemy unit, and therefore lessen the proportion of attacks that get spread around evenly. This is why every single one of my divisions is using signal companies. They boost initiative, which increases the proportion of attacks that get concentrated on the weakest enemy unit in the targeting list. And because more of the attacks are sent to this single division, there is a greater chance that the number of those attacks will exceed the defense value of that unit, dealing 4 times damage. This is also why my units are so big. A 51 width unit has a list of targets up to 102 combat width in size that will usually contain 5 to 7 enemy units in it. That list is huge, so there is a very good chance that the most vulnerable enemy unit in the entire battle will be on that list, because the game has 5 to 7 chances to find it as it randomly selects units to put on that list. In general, the bigger your divisions are, the greater the chance of the game finding a vulnerable unit for your division to focus its attacks on, because the list will be bigger, giving the game more chances to find a good target. You can see exactly why this matters by going through this same exact thought experiment from the other side. Now imagine that we are the bot. Most of our divisions are somewhere around 18 width in size. So imagine the battle from the perspective of one of these 18 width divisions under the bot's control. Let's go through this same process. We start by doubling that number, giving us 36. That is our engagement width. The game will now try to create a list of randomly selected enemy units for that 18 width division to fight. But the game immediately fails at doing this, because every single one of those enemy divisions are our 51 width behemoths. They don't fit on the targeting list. Thankfully for the bot, however, there is a failsafe here. When no enemy division fits on the targeting list, the game will still pick one at random and it will still put it on that list. Otherwise, the bot's division wouldn't deal any damage whatsoever. But this is the main point here. Because the bot is using such small units compared to ours, and we are using such big units, every single one of the bot's divisions can only fight one of our units at a time. The targeting list for every single one of their divisions always contains only a single one of ours. And this means that the bot's divisions don't have the ability to target anymore. We have completely removed that game mechanic for them. There is no weakest unit on the targeting list for the bot's divisions to focus on. There's just one unit on the list. So even though their unit's damage gets split into focused fire damage and splash damage, all the damage still ends up hitting the same target. And that target was randomly selected to be placed on that list in the first place. Coordination and initiative do literally nothing for the bot in this situation. Signal companies would have literally no effect for them if they were using them, and all of their damage just gets evenly distributed across our divisions. No prioritization of weak units occurs because all our divisions are too large to fit on the bot's targeting list. And this is one of the main differences between big units and small units that rarely gets mentioned in tutorials of this game. Small units are not good at targeting because their engagement width is so small that most of the time only 1 or 2 enemy units can fit inside it. Their damage is much more evenly distributed as a result. Big units, on the other hand, are much better at targeting because their targeting list is bigger and will therefore have more chances to find a good target to focus on. And in the Ragnarok mod, where battles are 3 times bigger than usual, this difference actually matters. To oversimplify all of this, signal companies are good on big units and bad on small units. The same applies for coordination bonuses. And in this extreme example where combat width is tripled, allowing us to create and use these huge 51 width units, we can create units so large that we effectively remove our enemy's ability to target altogether. And it is this targeting exploit that is at the very foundation of my entire strategy in this campaign. It is almost single-handedly responsible for us getting through those enemy tiles earlier on in Part 2 with 80 to 100 divisions on them. In those battles, for each one of our divisions, the game was randomly selecting 5 to 7 enemy units, populating a targeting list with them, finding the weakest one on that list, and then absolutely blasting that target with a massive proportion of our 2,000 to 3,000 soft attack, going way over their defense, and kicking each unit out of the fight like this, one at a time. And our units were so large that our enemy could not do the same thing to us. Their attacks were almost perfectly uniformly distributed among all our units, and therefore absorbed by their defenses, because every single time the game tried to create a targeting list for one of the bot's divisions, our 51 width units exceeded the size of it, so that list would only contain a single division. This is why the relatively low breakthrough of our infantry divisions didn't harm us nearly as much as it should have, and why we couldn't push with them. That is the exploit we honed in on with this strategy. That is how we memed our way to victory in every single battle. It would have been even more effective if we had been using tanks for this, but I think it has been shown now that this strategy is powerful enough in this mod that you can do it with infantry alone. The last thing that I'm going to mention before returning to the game is my reason for using line artillery. Line artillery is, after all, rather famously bad, so I'll give you my reasoning for using it. We are fighting the entire world. All the major countries have maxed out buffs as well. In other words, I knew in advance that we were going to be playing the whole game under red air, that there was going to be a ton of casts in every single air zone, because all the casts in the world was against us. And in this context, triple combat width is actually bad for us. A lot of people don't know this, but the total amount of casts that can fit inside a battle depends on the combat width of that battle. This means that all this extra cast was going to be able to fit into the battles when it otherwise shouldn't have been able to. I did not believe that a single support AA was going to cut it in conditions like those, and this is why I decided to use line AA. But the problem with line AA is that as soon as you put it into your division template, you lock the rest of that column in that template and make it so that you can only put more battalions of the same category into that column. You cannot put infantry and line AA into the same column of a division template. So when I put 2 battalions of line AA in, if I wanted to continue expanding the size of my division, which I very much wanted to do for the reasons I mentioned earlier, the only way to do it was by either putting in even more line AA, which I didn't need, putting in line anti-tank, which would have been useless, or putting in line artillery. And just like that, we have stumbled our way into one of the rare edge cases where line artillery actually makes sense to use. I wanted to continue expanding the division, and there was no other way to do it. Extreme red air forced us into using line AA, which in turn forced us into using line artillery to keep growing our division. And that sums up my entire strategy in this playthrough, in terms of division templates anyway, and why my units are performing as well as they are. And we're just in time now for the end of the Spanish campaign. You probably saw it earlier because I was struggling a bit with them, but I'm really not a fan of battle plans in this game at all. They aren't aggressive enough. Half the time, when you click the button to launch it, your units just sit there with that yellow exclamation mark next to them, saying, "Organization is too low to advance." But when you click on the unit and manually send it forward, it doesn't have any issues. It is very annoying watching your whole army just sit around when there isn't a single enemy division in front of them. If they just walked forward, they would get a bunch of free land, but they refuse. That's why I'm mostly just microwing everything. I try to use a battle plan every now and then, but they just don't end up working the way I want them to. And there goes Italy. We're just going to defend the Italian border here for now. We'll advance into the Balkans later. I've cut out all the footage of me researching stuff. It's 1946, everything important has already been researched, and I'm pretty much just clicking random buttons when a new slot opens at this point. And here I'm deploying my new port guards. I probably should be using dedicated port guard divisions rather than my standard line infantry units to save on resources, but at this point, I just can't be bothered to do that. Everything is always 51 width. And here comes the Great Eastern Push. We're going to go as far as we can with it. Ordinarily, you'd want to build planning bonus for something like this in advance, but all the spies in the world are in Berlin right now, and you just lose it all anyway, so there's no point. That was a pretty unbelievable nuke dodge right there. It almost landed on that guy, but he juked it just in time. I wasn't aware that the bot would actually try to target your units with nukes like that, but it seems that they do. There was nothing else there in that tile after all, or at least they used to target units with nukes. This is pre-DLC after all, so we're using the old nuke rules and raids aren't a thing yet. Originally, I wanted to hold this river line here, but since nobody's on the other side of it, I decided to just keep pushing instead. And here we just broke 100 million casualties. Here comes D-Day. Unfortunately for them, however, 22 under-equipped American divisions just isn't going to cut it. Our reserve army will be able to handle them. I get bogged down in these mountains here for a while. It's winter and there's deep snow, so it takes ages to push through them. And there is another example of why I hate the frontline system in this game. Units just automatically decide to randomly redeploy to the other side of the map, leaving some tiles completely empty. I try to pin these units in place at the last possible moment to try to get a unit there in time, but it's too late. It's not a big deal though, my other units are strong enough to break them out. Don't really understand why they left these massive gaps in the front, but I'm not complaining. I've also cut most of the footage showing what I'm doing in terms of garrisons, but here you can see some of it. Basically, due to our maintenance companies, we've stolen a lot of equipment. In particular, tons of tanks and tons of armored cars, and it's all just sitting in our stockpile collecting dust. So I made dedicated garrison divisions to use it, and I'm doing a bit of micro with them. When I run out of armored cars, I switch to tanks. When I run out of tanks, I use armored cars. And when I run out of both, I use regular cavalry garrisons. All of these templates are your typical 50 width with military police. But in any case, if you see the low garrison equipment notification at the top of the screen, that's why. It means I've run out of either tanks or armored cars and I need to swap out a garrison division or two. It's not a big deal. And here I'm making transport planes. I plan on using paratroopers later on, so we're going to need them. We finally hit 1 million casualties for us, but we're still trading at a 100-to-1 ratio, so it's not a problem. We've actually got 5.28 million men in the field compared to between 2.94 and 4.87 million for them. This means that even in the most extreme case, we still outnumber the entire rest of the world combined. In practice, however, our line still feels rather thin because most of our manpower is tied up in making our divisions big. We don't have many of them, and so holding a long front line can still be a bit problematic. It's time to try and link up with our units in Italy. We're trying to create a single unified front line stretching from the Adriatic all the way to the Baltic. Here, I'm taking a quick break to assign some metals. I'm prioritizing Org first, then Breakthrough, but I'm not going over 3 metals of each type. This is due to diminishing returns. Each new metal is only half as effective as the last. If the first metal of a specific type gives you a 10% bonus, for example, the second metal of that same type gives only a 5% bonus, then a 2.5 for the third, and so on. It halves each time. By the time you reach 3 metals, the bonuses become so small that they aren't really worth it anymore. When that happens, I start assigning the next type of metal. I'd only ever go above 3 if the unit already has 3 of each type. I also take the time here to try and ensure all units with metals are switched to my Elite Marine template. Our next goal is now to split this unified front line by pushing all the way to the coast of the Black Sea. That way we can create a Russian front and a Balkan front. At this point, I'm well aware of the fact that I could just launch a battle plan. Their line is thin enough. But due to my bad luck with battle plans in this campaign so far, I decide not to do this yet. I'm trying to push to a specific defense line, and I don't want to overextend myself. I don't intend to cap the Soviets anytime soon. We maxed out the difficulty at the start of the game and haven't done any collaboration governments, so we will have to push deep into their territory to make them capitulate. Well past the Urals. I don't even intend to take the Caucasus yet. Here, part of my front has reached the defense line I'm aiming for, so I unassign some units to make them stay put and cover the flanks and start shrinking the line. And there goes Moscow. And there I finally decided to launch a battle plan. I don't intend to invade Finland with it yet though, so I'll be shrinking the line and unassigning more units to ensure I don't overextend. We're just going to hold this river here. We're aiming for Istanbul next. Once we cut off Turkey, we'll turn west and push all the way to Albania to try and wrap around all these units in the Balkans. This looks like a decent place to stop the advance. We'll hold at Stalingrad and the Volga River for now. I don't want to push into Asia until all our flanks are secure. That means Scandinavia, the Balkans, and probably even Britain and North Africa. This is a good enough position to defend until we're ready to keep going. I don't want to cap the Soviets yet, because if I do, all we're going to get from it is a bunch of complicated borders to defend over in China and the Middle East. It's just much easier to hold here. That's a bit annoying. Strategic redeployment is disabled because of the French resistance, so my reserve army won't make it here anytime soon. Next, we're going to push up the coast here to take all these ports so we can cut off all these units. And for now, we'll just be cutting off Greece, not capturing it. I can't spare the troops for that just yet. Well, there we have it, our first major expansion. In the next part, we're going to be focusing on securing our flanks. Scandinavia, Britain, North Africa, and finishing off Greece. Only once all of those have been taken will we continue east.